In other words, imagine if two customers walk into a gun store and one buys a couple of guns and some ammunition, and their bill's about $3,000, but the next customer buys Carhartt material, clothing, and a gun safe, and they're $3,000. Well, both of them is going to raise the same level of suspicion, and this would appear identical on the credit card company. With pushbacks from Republican lawmakers, the credit card companies decided not to continue this plan, and certain Republican-led states across this country have started passing legislation to prohibit it from even being considered. So why is the law forbidding the tracking? This federal law is simple. It prohibits the federal government from collecting firearm sales records in a central repository. Federal law requires licensed firearm dealers to maintain gun records, and their businesses or licensed activity is discontinued, they must forward that information to the ATF. Keep in mind that in 1968 required federal licensed firearm dealers to report to ATF if there's any multiple firearm purchased by the same purchaser. So what does my bill do? Well, my bill specifically will forbid three prohibitions. It will prohibit credit card companies from identifying transactions with firearm merchants through the merchant code in connection with a payment card. It will prevent knowingly maintaining a record of individual who owns firearms, and would also prevent the discrimination against firearm merchants based solely on an assignment of or non-assignment of a firearm code, including by refusing to serve on similar terms or declining lawful payment card transaction. It would simply prohibit credit card companies from discriminating against merchants who sell guns and sell firearms and sell ammunition. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you for that presentation. Are there any questions or comments by any member of the committee? Representative Sane, you're recognized.
For a motion, I think we're recognized.
Yes, sir. Please hold that thought. Representative Harrison, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative Pirtle, for that explanation. In the beginning, you referenced 2022 legislation that had been promoted by gun control activists. Was this something part of that red flag law that happened at the federal level, or is this something that's going around in other states?
Representative Pirtle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, I think this was on the steps of the Capitol, and there were several lawmakers that just supported the idea of the ISO or IOS instilling this type of procedure.
Just a quick follow-up. So this practice doesn't currently exist. This is preemptory legislation?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
This legislation is completely preventative. When the pushback come, the credit card companies backed away from their plan to implement this policy, and other states have simply put in legislation to prevent it from occurring, and that's all this legislation is.
Any other questions or comments by any member of the committee? Representative Jones, you are recognized.
I'm trying to understand the bill, your bill, what it's trying to prevent. And as I understand what you're saying is you don't want records kept through credit card purchases of who is purchasing firearms. Is that a fair summary? I'm asking. That's a question.
That's the question.
Yes, that's a
Representative
question.
Keep in mind these merchant codes track merchants, not specific items right now, but it would roll everybody under the same umbrella of suspicion, whether they bought firearms and ammunition or Carhartt jackets, jeans, and a safe. Sometimes they cost about the same.
And I assume, yes, follow up, please. I'm trying to understand what it's trying to prohibit, though. And so my question is, if you took a credit card into a gun store, let me just call it a gun store, store that sells guns, and basically guns and ammunition and vests and, hunting stuff, and that's one right down the street from where my law office is in Wendell. You basically are saying you're trying to prevent records being kept of the sales. Is that a fair?
Representative Pirtle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Historically, right now, it just says retail.
Yes, sir.
I don't want it. This law will prevent it from saying guns or gun store instead of identifying as a retail store. It'll prevent it from being identified as a gun store.
You look perplexed. You want another follow-up?
I am perplexed, yeah. Okay, so,
You're recognized for another follow-up.
thank you, thank you. I guess I'm trying to understand, it's the nomenclature that you're targeting? You're trying to get them not to be able to use that language?
Representative Pearl.
My intent is to prevent the credit card company from in any way identifying anyone who purchased a firearm separate than if they purchased anything from retail. And they should not be a cloud of suspicion come over them simply because they purchased a firearm. We have federally licensed firearm dealers that deal in firearms, and they're the ones that are charged with maintaining the records of the sale of those firearms. And we don't need an independent third party solicited by lawmakers from Washington, D.C., encouraging another repository, which should not be taking place, of firearm owners. In the long run, that's what this bill is after.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. Any other questions or comments? Representative Arp, you're recognized.
To speak to Representative Jones's question, I'm going to support this bill. What Representative Pearl is trying to do is it's not that the firearms transactions are not tracked. That's by the gun store. They got to file that through the proper channels there, ATF and so forth. What this does is prevent the possible and feared abuse of disapproving transactions for gun sales, certain gun sales, ammos, things like that, and tracking it through the financial route rather than the official federal reporting requirements that has to happen. There's a great fear of abuse if this is allowed in the financial tracking system. And therefore, I'm going to vote for this.
Thank you for those comments. Any other questions by the committee? No one has signed up to speak either for or against the proposed legislation, so do I hear a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I make
Yes, that's right. I'm sorry, Representative
No
Sanders.
problem.
You're recognized for a motion.
Thank you, sir. I make a motion for a favorable on House Bill 5, on the PCS to House Bill 564, unfavorable to the original.
There's no PCS.
I'm sorry, I thought there was.
It's okay.
Yep.
So your motion is a favorable report on House Bill 564 with a referral to rules.
Correct.
That's the motion before us. Any discussion before we vote? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. The ayes have it. Receive a favorable report. Thank you, Representative Pearl.